How do you, as an employee, balance risk versus reward in a startup? What is the HiPPO effect, and how can it stifle innovation? How can startup employees find joy and fulfillment in their careers? In this episode of Startup Anthology, I sit down with Ross Miller. Ross is an entrepreneur with vast experience from advertising to tech commercialization. He shares his journey from consulting to acquiring and starting his own business, including his work at Bradley University and the challenges he faced at RV Air and natural fiber welding. Tune in to gain invaluable advice on strategic exits, effective hiring, and thriving in the startup ecosystem. Well, welcome to Startup Anthology. I'm interviewing a friend, Ross Miller. A mutual friend of ours introduced us, put together this connection. Ross is an entrepreneur, formerly been more of a consultant to entrepreneurs and kind of plugging himself into startups and not necessarily being a part of them. But recently, I guess about 2-3 months ago now.
Yeah, 4 months.
You've actually started your own business.
Yep, acquired one.
Ross has done everything from advertising in print back in the day for newspapers and making that transition to online advertising to helping entrepreneurs at Bradley University. I want to thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Jeremy.
Go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I started in advertising in the media at the time, in newspaper, radio, ad agencies. At the beginning of 97, I was working for a newspaper group that was moving all their suburban newspapers over to the web. And so did marketing to get businesses in those areas into web advertising. I called those the years of preaching in the wilderness because I was in suburban Louisville, Kentucky, talking to a lot of business owners who had never been on the internet before and trying to convince them to put their business on the internet, and had to educate them a lot on what was involved. Funny story there was that the editor at the time for that newspaper group came up to me and said, the web is really just like the ham radio of communications. Newspapers are going to last forever. And I just kind of said, we'll see, we'll see. And 30 years later,
Yeah.
it's kind of proven out. But at that time, that's for his career, that's what it was. It was the prime media that everybody turned to.
Was that right before the dot-com bust back in?
Yes.
And it kind of became a self-fulfilling prophecy for him. But I mean, then
Exactly.
again, it came back around. Oh,
I went from talking to and developing $2,000 websites to working with another group called Multi-Ad Services, where we built websites to deliver ad content to dealer networks for global 500 companies. Went from building $2,000 websites to working on $250,000 projects for folks like Toyota and Lexus and Chevrolet and groups
that's
like
cool.
that.
That's a 2 decimal point change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's crazy.
I would often say that to my clients when I was advising them is big businesses don't have small problems. They always have big problems. And so oftentimes you can't go into a large multinational and say, oh yeah, I can fix that problem for $2,000. They're like, well, you don't understand our problem then. Our problem is a $200,000 problem.
Yeah. I mean, it was probably a mind change for you, or
Definitely.
a mindset change. Yeah.
Right. They had the same problems as small businesses. They just had more money to throw at it. And so they were willing to spend that money.
It's the same problem, but the same problem at scale.
Correct.
Yeah.
And around the dot-com bust in 2001, I decided I wanted to get back involved with small businesses. So I took a job with Bradley University's Small Business Development Center as an e-business specialist, working with small businesses, developing IT strategy and web strategy for how to promote their companies. That later evolved to working with startups directly, and eventually became director of the Small Business Development Center. Over the course of 19 years, worked with thousands of clients, over 4,000 clients, and hundreds of startups, business acquisitions, and different things. I later on became the director of technology commercialization, so worked more on the IP side, people who are creating new products and how to get patent protection, trademark protection, those types of things. I was mainly looking at the outside world and helping
Hmm.
out other businesses because Bradley is a mid-major Division One university, and it's landlocked within Peoria.
Okay.
Early on, presidents of the university were saying, as the community goes, so does Bradley. So we need to have a strong business environment in Peoria in the area in order to
That's,
allow for Bradley students to get employed in the area and have opportunities for research and
that's
things
really
like that.
cool to have that kind of foresight. It's huge impacts, right? You're gonna provide the workforce to the community and help the community create the working culture. It's self-sustaining, and then their children will go to school and go to Bradley, and then just follow that. Yeah,
Exactly, and that's the goal as far as the administration. A lot of the faculty often held up the students who went to Silicon Valley and went to work far off
well,
as successes, but I always would tell them if they can get a job here in the Peoria area making close to 100,000 compared to making 120 out in Silicon Valley, they have a much better lifestyle.
that's true. That's true. In that whole 6 county area, I think it's 6 counties in Peoria. There's only like 600,000 people.
Correct.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
not a huge metropolitan area, but it has
correct.
good proximity to Chicago
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
Midwest. Yeah,
Good proximity to Chicago, St. Louis, Indianapolis as well. So major cities,
major manufacturing cities. Yeah.
correct. A lot of opportunities around there.
Sorry, I
From
sidetracked us.
That's all right. There, as my career progressed, I became the director of the Institute for Innovation through Collaboration in the College of Business and College of Engineering. It was a new institute that the deans at that time developed out that was focused on more product development and how to get engineers and business people talking together early on so that they understand each other. Talking to people in the industry, they thought it was a great idea. A lot of the people who came out of school with an engineering degree would advance in their career and become managers and different things and found that their skills weren't where they wanted them to be. So they would end up going back to get a MBA.
Okay,
And they saw the benefit of engineers understanding the business side and business people understanding how engineers think and how they work on problems.
that's cool. The engineers and business people think differently.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
And they're both right for
Hmm.
what they need, what they're working on, for the
Exactly.
problems that they're working on. What becomes interesting is when you find that hybrid of an engineer who can think on the business side or a business person who can communicate well with the engineers. Those are vital for companies, large and small.
Hmm.
As a matter of fact, one of my students, because I got to teach while I was the director of that, I would teach one class a semester. One of my students, I think he was mechanical engineering, and he said, "This class taught me I'm really not in love with engineering,
Oh,
but I
wow.
love this part of it." And he goes, "I'm a semester away from graduating. There's no way that I'm gonna switch majors now." But he went and applied at Accenture and has a successful career consulting. And
That's
they
awesome.
loved his aspect because they could pair him up with business people, business consultants to go into a
That's really cool.
client. And he has that engineering knowledge
Right.
that helped give a different perspective on solutions. My time with that institute ended in the middle of 2019, and I had looking at my goals for life and everything. My youngest son was 1 year from graduation. One of the benefits of working at a university is your kids get free tuition. I still want him to complete his degree, but I want to start looking at what my next career move is gonna be.
Mm,
So I
okay.
started working part-time for the university and joined a startup, joined RV Air. We made premium air filters for the recreational vehicle market.
Oh, that's cool.
The founder had a great idea. He was an avid RVer. He and his wife were visiting Big Bend down in Texas,
Hmm.
and she had this terrible allergy outbreak. And he was talking to the doctors and he said, "How can we fix this? Because we can't just keep on coming in to get shots to help her all the time because we're traveling all over the place." And they said, "Start looking at what the interior air looks like within the RV." And he pulled out the filters and the air conditioning units of the RV, and they're this flimsy filter. It has big
Oh,
holes. Basically, air conditioning manufacturers put those filters in to keep big bugs out of the system,
okay.
right? But they
Right.
don't really care about the small particulates. And so he started working with he's a serial entrepreneur, and he started working with some filter manufacturers and looking at how can we put a denser filter in there without affecting the performance air conditioning unit. Came up with a great system, even developed out some other
Hey.
products that included a charcoal
Wow.
activated
Oh,
carbon filter that
yeah.
would clean out the smells that were within there. Because a lot of your full-time RVers,
Mhm. Smell.
they yeah, you're living in there and you got all your dirty laundry and you got
Right.
everything else, and he goes, "A lot of those full-time RVers won't invite you into their
Uh,
unit because they're embarrassed by it." You work in the Navy, were you ever in any nuclear subs?
Always nuclear subs, and
Okay.
we smelled bad, and we had scrubbers and all the things to get the crap out of the air. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I had a friend of mine in college who had just come out of the Navy and was a submariner, and he was like, "Yeah, you hit that hatch and you're just blown away by the smell," and he goes, "After a few minutes, you don't notice it anymore."
Permeates you. So when you get back from a deployment, it's okay. You don't come in the house until you shower. You leave all your stuff in the garage or outside.
Right,
It's called amine. It's how they get the CO2 out of the air, and it just smells so bad. But you don't realize it after a few minutes.
right. So when I joined RV Air, they had just gotten we called it the golden ticket from Walmart. They were about ready to blow up over that, which took them from making under 100 grand in revenue selling stuff at RV shows to basically an exponential growth, 10 times growth of the company. And so our major goal was, how do we diversify from Walmart? How do we now take that success and not only be able to digest it and be able to build up inventory and all that to be able to supply Walmart, but now we have to find other ways to distribute that is gonna make Walmart less than 25% of our total revenue. And that's where a lot of startups and a lot of small businesses end up failing. One is just being able to digest that growth, right? Startups often don't die from lack of customers. They die from too many customers and not being able to manage cash. It
It's yeah, because
exactly.
they're all worried about growth, but then
How do you fund
how do you fund it? How do you maintain it so that it doesn't your growth doesn't outrun your cash?
correct,
Yeah.
correct. And we ended up signing by the end of 2019, we ended up signing up with the largest distributor to RV dealers
Hmm.
in North America. And then from there, we grew it to we had about 5 other distributors in 20 or in 21. We added on those 5 other distributors. We took that company a good way. I stayed part-time with them throughout that whole sequence, and our goal was to have an exit within 5 years of when I started in 2019, and we had people contacting us continuously,
Hmm.
about acquiring the company, but we knew that we weren't at a stage where we were gonna get the highest value at the time. But in '21, We got an offer that we couldn't refuse
Hmm.
and was at a stage of a pinnacle stage for the company where we were either going to have to bring on employees. It was run as a virtual company, had no employees except for the founders. And we were either going to have to bring in employees to grow that company even further or take the acquisition at the time. And so the founders decided that this was a great time to get out and go on to the next stage of what they wanted to do.
Always keep that exit strategy in mind.
I always tell my clients with the consulting business, my first question is, how do you want to exit?
Hmm.
Because you're going to leave this company. We're all just written a seat. Even the founders are written a seat, right?
Hmm.
You're gonna leave this company walking out the door or being hauled out on a stretcher, right? One way
Yeah,
or the
that's
other,
true. Yeah.
there's gonna be an exit. How do you want that exit to go? And what do you want for that company for that next stage? So something to keep it always something to keep in mind.
I'm going back to a few other people. Jake Hammond, he brought that
Mhm.
up too whenever he was hiring for his marketing consulting company. And he was getting younger talent were coming in, and we want people to maintain the culture that we've established because this is just a stopping point. This is not their career. They're not going to be here for 20 years or
Right,
they're going to go on to somewhere else. We want to help them flourish and help develop their career, not just
right,
milk everything for the company. Yeah.
exactly. And yeah, employees and owners need to think about what is that exit gonna be?
Cool.
What do I want to gain from my time at that company? What knowledge do I want to have? What do I want this to build into for the next step in my career?
Yeah, that's definitely good advice.
Mhm. Yeah, most people are just focused on the here and now, and I just want to get this job, but always be thinking about what's that next step and what's my exit out of here look like? What do I want to gain during that time?
That leads me to a question. When do you start thinking about that exit? Is it like as soon as you get into the business or you've been in it for a little bit, or do you let a opportunity flourish and you, oh, there's something I see a little crack there. That might be my exit. And where were you advising people to when to start thinking about that and how?
I start have them start thinking about it at the very beginning.
Okay.
Have them start thinking about that before they start the company or early on in the company, because that helps you to when you're thinking about making decisions with the end in mind, you're thinking about how is this decision going to help me get further or closer to
Yeah. Okay.
that
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 makes
end
sense.
goal, right?
Yeah. It helps you navigate to that point. It's not just a floundering.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct. And and that strategy is gonna help you to make those better decisions and be thinking about how to push it to get closer to that exit.
Okay. Cool. Derailed us
So
again. I'm sorry.
that's a
D-
hey, this is a great conversation.
yeah.
So I completely left Bradley in the height of COVID. I had agreed that I would do a 1-year contract with Bradley doing the part-time. So I knew at the end of May 2020 that my time at Bradley would be over. And
Okay.
COVID hit and it became that part-time job became a full-time job of advising businesses through all
Mm,
the issues of COVID and the PPP loans and the small business, the SBI the
government
employer
soup
loans,
loans.
the government soup. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, all the acronyms that I've blocked
Yeah.
out of my mind. But that became just a crazy time of just all the dramatic
Cha-
changes around COVID that
chaos
happened.
almost. Yeah.
Exactly.
Just chaos. Yeah. You
Yeah, we shut down businesses and business owners are going, "What do I do now? What am I supposed to
know,
do? How am I supposed to keep my employees?" And all those things, and how do I navigate just all the complexities of getting through this time without knowing when this was gonna end. Shutdown.
yep. No exit strategy at hand.
It was
You
like
couldn't. Yeah.
you couldn't. You were at the mercy of the local governments allowing you to get back into your business and bring your employees back. So that was a difficult time and a difficult time for everybody involved. Um, in June of 2020, I was working with RVR, doing everything through my consulting company, and had a few different clients. As a matter of fact, I had a large project that had opened up at the beginning of 2020 that I ended up canceling the contract with the company. It was a startup that we were exploring different ways to make their company a national brand, and ended up COVID hit and ended up needing to cancel that whole contract,
Hmm.
which was not a fun experience, but minuscule compared to what other business owners had to go through during that
Did,
time.
did they make it through or did they close their doors as well?
They ended up pausing and
Hmm.
then went from looking at it being a national brand to being a local brand.
Well, cool. Okay.
So they ended up opening a shop here locally. And so they're still in business. They're still seem to
That's
be
good.
thriving, and which is great. And yeah, they pivoted and made it work for them.
Great.
So,
Cool. Just curious on that. That's,
hmm
yeah.
Are you passionate about startup culture? Then head over to our website at startupanthology.com to join the community and share your story. Remember to check out the merch section of our website at startupanthology.com. Support the podcast and the show you love with our exclusive line of tees, hoodies, hats, and more. Trust me, you'll want to wear these at your next hackathon. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, X, and connect with us on LinkedIn. So what are you waiting for? Dive into the Startup Anthology universe and be a part of a community. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
And during that time, also, I had a former coworker and a friend of mine who was working for a startup here locally called Natural Fiber Welding, which made eco-friendly materials for the fashion and automotive industry.
Hmm.
Started doing some projects for them, and in late 2020, they said, "We're gonna bring this position in-house. Do you wanna become an employee?" So I decided to join them because 'cause I'd known this company since its start, and I liked their mission. I liked the people involved, and I decided to take a full-time position with them.
Wow.
So
That's a big change, big step.
it is. I find that in a weird way, it's easier to deliver bad news or disagree with
Hmm.
leadership as a consultant than
Hmm.
as an employee. It's just psychologically, it's different.
Yeah. That's actually a good point. Just thinking about that. There is the contract agreement between a consultant that kind of veils you and offers a little bit of protection because you don't have just one customer, right? One client at a time.
Right.
You probably have several, so you have multiple streams of income.
Exactly.
That makes it easier to say, "Oh, you do this, and I'm going to go do this." But if you're
Right.
employed, you have one stream of income. You're not multi-streamed. You're wholly reliant on maintaining good relational standing with the company.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And and oddly enough, it's easier for a company to get out of working with a consultant than it is to fire an employee. But on the opposite side, as like you said, as a consultant, you have multiple clients. You can
Mm.
fire a client if you need to. And I always encourage my clients that I would advise, I would tell them there are certain customers you need to fire. And
Mm.
because they're going to be a drag on your resources, they're going to be constantly arguing with you over costs and what you're charging. And there are clients that are better than other clients. So at certain times,
Mm.
you need to fire certain clients as a way to be able to grow your company because they're dragging down your resources to be able to find other customers.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Um, but as an employee, like you said, that's your sole source of income.
Right.
And if you lose, when you lose that, then what are you going to do? You're going to have to find someplace else to go.
Yeah, I was trying to, as you're talking about that, I was just trying to balance it. Okay. Just speaking of startups and
Hmm.
depending on that pre-seed, seed, and series A, I wonder if there's a world where someone's network can be such that they leave one startup or one company because they want to, like what you're saying, you want to fire a client because of whatever reason. I wonder if you could make that mentality change or that shift in this kind of startup ecosystem of thinking of yourself more as a consultant because you more or less are at a
Hmm.
point. I'm going to put that in the data bank.
Yeah.
Come back to that later. Not just or
Yeah.
startup anthology. I think it's
And in order to do that, you have to really be embedded in the ecosystem, right?
hmm
And you have to be going to showcases and seeing startups pitch and getting to know other founders and things like that. You need to you need to be out there networking constantly in order to have those opportunities. And sometimes that's difficult when you're in the as a startup employee because you're working 80 hours a week for that startup, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And the networks that are there for startups and entrepreneurs, everything are for the company and the entrepreneur and the investor, not necessarily for the employee to come back and
Right.
make connections and other like they'll know the founders where they are and if they might be able to help them via another founder to get to another company. So it's very indirect. There's no
Yes.
direct path to
Correct.
another place.
Correct. Just yeah, because when you go into networking events, like you said, everybody's geared towards the founders. The first thing they'll usually
hmm
ask is, "What are you working on?" And
Right.
and they're looking for what's that new idea that's out there that somebody's trying to raise money for or find a partner for. But as you're going when you're going in as an employee, it's often difficult to have those good conversations. At the same
Exactly.
time, founders need to be looking for those people with talents that are complementary to theirs, that are beyond theirs. Like I work around a lot of product-based businesses. Those founders oftentimes either come in with a business perspective or engineering perspective, right?
hmm
And they need to when their first hires need to be people who are not like them,
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
which is difficult for founders to get through because we all like to hire people who are like us, right?
hmm
Have the same mentalities, similar attributes, or similar experiences, but they really will excel faster if their first hires are people who are not like them and come in with a different aspect or different talents or skill sets.
That's interesting. This is me just postulating. I think at the beginning, you need to hire more people that fit your culture. Obviously, you don't want to hire someone that doesn't have any experience in that realm or that
Right.
industry, which I
Mhm.
think you need to hire more for maintaining that culture than someone who's going to be just like you. I think that's a big thing because you don't want to ask all the experience questions. What do you think about this? How do you program this? I think it'd be more the soft skills that you want to ask for. What's your entrepreneurial goal? Do you have vision? Do you have passion? Yeah, it's interesting.
Mhm. And founders, there's a lot of things to be considering when you're founding a company, but the culture kinda develops on its own, and you do have to monitor it and watch it, but to a certain aspect.
Yeah, you can curate it as it goes, but it's a self-developing, self-replicating,
Right.
and if it's not shepherded, I guess it would be just wait until I say it's going to just go jump off a cliff. So could
It
if
could.
and yeah, could.
It could. But yeah, looking for people that have those soft skills and understand the requirements of startups is important. It's not a 9 to 5. Even for the employees, it's not a 9 to 5.
Well,
But at the
right.
same time, nobody's gonna work harder. Nobody should be working harder than the founders,
hmm
in that company. You can't expect somebody who's got some options to be working as hard as somebody who is founding the
Yeah.
company.
Who has grants.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's cool.
So natural fiber welding eventually evolved. I came in probably as employee number 80 at the time, and we quickly grew to about 300 employees.
Oh, wow.
Um, and I started looking around, and realizing that everybody that they're bringing in is coming out of the corporate world, coming in with specific skill sets, specialized skill sets. And I'm very much a generalist. I can do everything from maintaining the books to driving a forklift.
That's a wide berth of skills.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The guy who hired me on at NFW, my friend, he saw that too, and he decided that he wanted to leave the company.
Mm,
And so when he left, then I got pulled in full time with the legal team. And I was,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
I was the oddball. All these things don't look, one of these things doesn't look like the other.
yeah.
And that was me on the legal team.
Well, you said
But
you could do a lot of things. I guess it was just walked in, started working. Seriously.
it was I gave a lot of perspective to the lawyers
Mm,
because in helping them with understanding what the business model was, helping them understand what how customers need to flow to be able to streamline our legal agreements, to be able to protect our intellectual property, which I worked a lot with intellectual property as well on that, and then to be able to people from the get customers from or prospective customers from testing out the materials to and understanding what the materials, how the materials could be used to actually buying materials and
mm,
things that were open for sale.
oh, cool.
So there was a lot of good exchange of ideas working with the legal team
Mm,
and helping them through those processes.
that's
But
interesting.
eventually it devolved into, I should say evolved into where we
I
brought
was
the
wondering what you
yeah.
were, I was going to let you go, but
It evolved
uh,
into we brought our IP attorney in-house, and he brought his paralegal with him, and so where I was an IP liaison between our tech
oh, I get it.
team
Okay.
and the IP attorneys,
Mm,
then it became where the IP attorney could work directly with the tech team.
okay. So,
Um,
as the British would say, it became redundant.
correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so my job duties as I saw it became more as a digital paper pusher, where I was being farmed out to different groups for various things that needed to be done, but it was a lot of filling out forms and different
That made
things
me
that
laugh. You said digital paper pusher.
exactly. Yeah. So at that time I started looking at, okay, what's my exit? What's my next
So
thing that I wanted.
that really took me off guard. I've never heard that term, and that really threw me for a loop. Sorry. I don't know why. It's not even that. It's just great. Digital paper pusher. So I can relate. That's why it's so funny.
Oh, yeah, it's and
Wow.
that's a warning sign
Something's bad.
for startups.
Yeah, to warn us that something bad's about to happen.
Exactly, yeah. If you, oh, shoot, I always hate it when I think of a book and I can't remember the title or the author. Um,
I'll look it up.
the,
That's fine. We got time.
okay.
And oh, speaking of book, I don't want to. I've been reading The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that book is hilarious as well as informative. So
Oh, yeah, Ben Horowitz
yeah,
is a great author.
he's a Jewish guy who quotes gangster rap. As
Exactly. You
and
gotta
is
love it.
and he's working in the greatest capitalistic market in the world. And his dad was a card carrying communist. It's just ironic. Sorry.
Yes, that is a great book. I highly recommend it to anybody who's getting into the startup slash high growth companies because it really helps you to understand the decisions that you're gonna have to make
Mm,
along the way. And sometimes it's even the offbeat decisions that you need to make that nobody expected. It can either kill the company or make it grow exponentially, and you gotta take those risks. I recommend that to everybody who is looking to go into a scaling business. I'm
Well,
sure it'll come to me at some point, but the concept is as companies grow, there is a bell curve that's gonna happen with that company, and it starts with the founder and usually a second person. So the founder is always the visionary, and the second person is the doer who can take that founder's vision and actually get something completed out of it, created out of it.
hmm,
Because founders are great at vision, but often founders are your ADHDs
yeah,
types
yeah.
that will go off to the next shiny fish
Mm.
as soon as they see it, right?
Have you come across a thing called Working Genius? It's from Patrick Lencioni.
Did he write also the 5 dysfunctions of a team?
Yeah,
Yeah.
same guy.
Okay.
But I took the survey. And it was quite interesting. There's only 6 types of working genius, and they're wonder, invention, discernment, galvanizing, enablement, and tenacity. And I fell into this invention and discernment category. And the whole premise of this is you don't want to work with somebody that is the same, right? Because your superpowers are both the same. They're not going to be complementary, but you
Correct.
do want some overlap. So if you want to, I would be working good with a discernment slash galvanizer. The galvanizer is like actually the person who figures out how to make the idea tangible, I guess. And
Okay.
then the last two, the enable and tenacity, are more of the, oh, I got to get it done. Here's my list. Bop, 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 bop. I'm going to do every single thing on this list until it's done. The tenacity to complete something. So it's like that
Mhm.
whole 6 working genius spectrum. You take it
Right.
and you find people that are complementary to you. It's
Right.
very, very cool.
And you have to have those people who are gonna be your bulldogs, who are gonna take a
Hmm.
task and just they're gonna get it done no matter what, because otherwise the company is constantly swimming after new shiny fish, right?
It's
And
nebulous. There's a great vision, no plan of execution. Yeah.
exactly. So when you have those 2 types working together, it helps the company to grow, and then you get into this fun stage of you're having high growth, everybody's involved, but the owner, the founder, is usually highly involved in everything that's done with the company, and it becomes a bottleneck, right?
Mm, hmm.
And as the company grows, then you get into this whitewater area where you're not meeting deadlines, your things are getting held up because of that bottleneck.
Right.
And so that's when the founder needs to pull themselves back from being involved in every single decision. And
Yeah.
then you can get into predictable success. That's the name of the book, Predictable Success.
I knew we'd get to it. Yeah.
We'd get to it eventually. And at that time for predictable success, you need to bring in this person, and I'm combining a couple of his books, but the synergist, that's his second book is the synergist. The synergist is somebody who can put processes to what's being done, where previously it was all being created basically by artisans, right?
Hmm.
Artisans who were taking a job from start to finish and being able to complete it. What the synergist does is set up processes so that parts of the project can be done by different people,
Hmm.
and it can
Simultaneously.
simultaneously and allow you to do more, exponentially more, right?
Mm.
The danger of that is when we become over-processed, right? We have too many processes, and
Yep.
you're becoming that digital paper pusher, right?
Hmm.
And that's usually when the founder gets bored with the company because 'cause they're like, "I didn't start this to be CEO of a major corporation."
Yeah.
And they start looking at where's the next thing I need to be working on? What's the next thing I need to go to? What's gonna bring me excitement and fulfillment in my life?
Is that this inflection point you're talking about when you go from not enough process to too much process there's probably an inflection point there. If
Mhm.
the CEO stays on too long, is that in your experience, have you seen that if the company's going to struggle along?
If it doesn't have good leadership, it's going to become overprocessed. Whether the founder stays there or not, it becomes overprocessed. And the people who were with you at the beginning, the people who are getting things done, and the innovators within the company are
Hmm.
going to find other places to go that is going to bring them more fulfillment in their
Gotcha.
career and what they want to do.
What about
Uh,
on just if it doesn't quite meet that,
if it doesn't
yeah,
hit that tipping
it,
point,
that tipping point, but you're still below, you don't have enough process. Like you're still, everything's still artisan.
if everything's still artisan, then you're still sitting in that whitewater and
Hmm.
it'll fail there too,
For the
right?
engineers, that's called turbulence.
Okay.
No, I'm just, I'm,
Translating.
yeah, sorry.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good. But yeah, it can fail with businesses. There's a million reasons that it'll fail, right?
Okay.
And but if you don't have those processes, if you stay in that artisan scenario, oftentimes you can't have that growth. And so in that turbulence or whitewater spot, people have that decision point of,
Mm.
do we drop back to where we were having fun? Do we
Oh,
let people
gotcha.
go, condense the company, and stay in that fun stage? Or do we try to push and develop those processes and get to that point where we can experience higher growth?
Where is that occurring at? If we categorize the startup as obviously this is not pre-seed, this is probably not even seed. Is it a series A or B, or is it closer to C and then going public or
It's probably gonna be around the Series A, between Series A and Series B.
okay.
Usually with B, you're gonna have some proof of being able to scale this thing,
Okay.
right? And that might happen between B and C. It depends on how favorable
It's that
or,
window starts probably between A and a half
yeah.
and B plus. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's when you're finding those opportunities to be able to deliver at scale, right?
Mm,
And and if you don't have those opportunities to be able to deliver at scale, nobody's gonna put major investment
right.
into that company. They're gonna be able to see through that. Um, so basically, the whole concept behind that book and or those that series of books is that if you can balance it where you have enough processes to be able to scale, but not over processed,
That you don't
then
stymie innovation.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. Because you got to have every company. No company exists on just one product, right? No
Yeah.
business exists on one product. You have to have that innovation and you have to have those innovators to be able to go outside of those processes
Hmm.
to create new things.
That's
Um,
a lot life aspect of this. We live in tension on a lot of things, right? We live in tension of like in the startup world specifically, moving from that generalist role to that specialist role, moving in the growth stage, going from the tension of like we're talking about now is process versus no process. There has to be some, but there can't be too many. So you're balancing this tension all the time. It's
right.
very, it's an uncomfortable place to live.
Hmm.
Tension, but it's necessary. Yeah.
There's good tension and there's bad, right?
Mhm.
There, when you're constantly having fist fights in the hallways, that's bad tension.
That's, that's violent tension and
Exactly.
violent intentions.
When you have people who are having disagreements in meetings,
Yeah.
that's probably a good tension, right?
Yeah.
Differences of opinion, differences of how the a process should go, or where the company should go. That's good things that need to be explored.
That
Um,
actually reminds me when we did our pre-interview, you mentioned the HiPPO effect, which I
yes,
started digging into a little bit more. That's I think that kind of lands in this area.
right.
If you wouldn't mind explaining that a little bit and what you've seen.
So the HiPPO effect is the highest paid person's opinion, HPPO, and that is basically where conversation will stop when the founder or high executive states, "This is what we need," or "This is what I want to see happen." Really stops new ideas because then everybody's focus is on how do we make that person's opinion happen. right? So as a leader of a company, the leader needs to be asking more questions than stating stating opinion,
Hmm.
right?
Okay.
And needs to pull those things, pull ideas out of people as opposed to this is what we need to do. They can
I
state a goal.
yeah.
They can state a goal of, hey, we need to get this accomplished. How can we get it done?
Hmm.
But not stating we need to get this accomplished and this is how I think we should do it.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. So it's them not only saying, here's the goal, but here's the individual steps that you must take to achieve that goal. Right. Yeah.
then all
Yeah.
creativity goes out the window.
Then you become a
Um,
digital paper pusher.
exactly.
Seriously,
Right.
that becomes, you just start now, it's all tactical. There's no strategic going on. And like, how do I have to meet these individual steps? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
It becomes powerful and it becomes stifling because oftentimes a company grows, the founder doesn't have the frontline knowledge
Mm.
that all the other people in the room have. And so
It's the game of
it,
telephone,
exactly.
basically. Yeah.
And that game of telephone is people telling that founder what they want to hear in order to keep their job. Where middle managers who will, oh, everything's going great with my group. When the reality is that they're getting constant complaints from their employees around different things, and they're not passing that up the chain of, hey, this is what's going on because that they believe will reflect bad on them.
Mm. It becomes that what you mentioned earlier. It's easier for a consultant to give bad news or tough news than it is for an employee to give it because they're limited to the income specifically from that employer.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Vicious cycle.
Very
Yeah,
right.
that if it's not realized, it becomes an issue.
Hmm. Right. And there's so much ego that gets
Yeah.
involved.
Yeah. Yep.
And it just kills the company, kills creativity, kills innovation, is not beneficial to the growth of that company.
This is a great conversation.
Awesome.
Yeah. The digital paper pusher. Sorry. It's still just in my head. The reason I say that is because I got to that point. That's what I was doing
Yeah.
too. And it was like, oh, I'm just, in Ben Horowiz's book, he was talking about the guy that worked at EDM, the first few chapters. I went through like chapter 2 or 3 right now.
Okay.
Anyways, the guy name was Frank. He was the person that makes the decision to get Loud Cloud sold to this other cloud server software provider. Anyways, and he said, and the one little thing is this guy said he wants an extra long layover between San Jose and Dallas, and however long. He's, well, why does he want the extra long layover? Because he hates his job, and it's like, oh crap, he's just digitally pushing paper. And when
Right.
he said that, I was, oh, I'm here just going through the motions and not necessarily contributing anymore. And
Hmm.
so that was the realization. I think it's time for my exit because
Right. And that is one of the things on the outgrowing startup employees.
oh,
Sometimes
it's
startup employees outgrow the company. It's getting to be too corporate and understanding yourself of where do I thrive as a startup employee, right? Is it in that growth stage? Is it in that processes stage? Is it in the maintaining stage, right? Where thinking of yourself and where do you fit in best or enjoy your life with that startup? Where's the most fun, right? For
Mhm.
you, understanding that kind of brings some freedom to yourself as well of when do I need to exit out of this company, right? And definitely when it becomes no fun, when you're just pushing digital paper for a lot of startup employees, that takes all the fun out of it. You enjoyed it when we were creating something brand new and something that had never been done before. And you got to have your hands in a lot of different things and new experiences, and you could apply your diverse background to solve these interesting problems. And then you get to this point where there's no more interesting problems. It's all mundane problems that is probably better off for
Mhm.
somebody else to figure out. There are plenty of other people who love mundane problems.
Yeah, I see
right?
more of that tenacity and galvanizing enablement working
Yes.
area, the other
Mhm.
end of the spectrum.
Exactly. Exactly. And so understanding yourself of where do I get fulfillment out of my career helps you to be able to make those exits and find that next thing that you want to do.
What advice would you give your younger self as you were getting into the entrepreneurial world, into actually just your career period to help you now or what?
I would have gotten into startups and founding companies a lot sooner in my career when I had a lot less to lose because
Oh,
you get handcuffed as you go. My kids were born in 96 and 98, and I had to make decisions for their welfare, and going to work at Bradley was one of those big decisions, and then needing to stay at Bradley in order to get the benefit of them having free tuition. So you get handcuffed over time, but I think the earlier that I would have gotten into working for startups, starting up companies, I think that would have helped mentally to
mm,
be able to have those experiences, and taking more risks, been beneficial.
taking more risk.
Right.
That's an interesting one because like you don't necessarily know how much risk you can tolerate until you get into a situation where you
Right.
can't tolerate it anymore. It's a hindsight type thing. That comes with experience then.
And when you take those risks, a lot of times people will say to me, entrepreneurs, they're really good risk takers. And
Mhm,
I argue with them and I say, no, entrepreneurs aren't good risk takers, but they're good at mediating risks.
mhm.
They can identify what are the risks out there, and then they can say, okay, but if I do this, that will reduce the effect of that risk.
Yeah, that's I guess the entrepreneurial vision that more startup employees need to have, which they gain over time and experience. But as they come in, they just don't understand because they're taking a risk too, because 9 out of 10 startups fail. If you don't realize what those risks are and help mitigate those, you could lose a lot. You could become angry. You could become bitter and potentially make a dumb decision that could affect your earning potential is the
Right.
and your joy as a
Hmm.
startup employee.
Right.
You let that dictate those type of things and it becomes bad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, because startup employees, they aren't going to get rich working in startups. What's going to help them is being in a startup that scales and has that exit, has the IPO or whatever, where their exercised options can be worth something down the line, right?
Hmm. Right.
Whereas if you go to work for, whereas if you go to work for a corporation, be paid a good amount, but there's not too much scalable outcome out of that, right?
Right.
Exponential outcome out of
Well,
that.
yeah, risk reward type thing with a corporation like that. Once you leave, you're done. There's
Right.
no more income coming in. Once you leave a startup, there's potential for something to occur regardless if you're there or not, if you
Right.
take care of those options and those grants or however you get awarded equity. So,
Exactly. That's probably the best advice I would have for my younger self is getting involved in the startup world a lot sooner.
d- what are you currently working on to your current endeavor?
The acquisition is,
Hmm.
we have a subscription box company called Maven Bridal Box. It can be found at Maven, Maven, box.com. We are the number one luxury, rated the number one luxury subscription box for brides to be. We moved our operation to Peoria in May and have been working on that for the past few months.
That's cool.
It's exciting, again, and helping to understand myself. I realize that I'm much better at the 10 to 100 versus the 0 to 1. So I'm much better at scaling companies than I am at creating something out of nothing. And so I started looking at acquiring a company probably 18 months before I bought this company.
Okay.
Looked at a lot of different companies, looked at different opportunities, and really landed on this company because they had built a beautiful brand in a market that is always growing, and people spend a lot of money on it during the time of weddings.
Same.
And so saw it as a good opportunity. I brought in a partner because I should not be the face of a bridal subscription box company.
Me neither.
And my partner is much closer to the market than
Mm,
I will ever be.
mhm.
And so she's handling all the marketing side of
Oh,
things
cool.
and the product development side, and I'm handling the operations, financial side, and supplier relations. So it's a good partnership. The African saying goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with a team.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
so,
That's a good proverb. That's cool.
yes.
How can people connect with you?
Yeah, they can reach me through LinkedIn, Ross Miller. There's thousands of Ross Millers I've
Hmm.
discovered, but
Yes.
I'm the one in Greater Peoria,
Okay.
Greater Metropolitan Peoria area. And or my business email, my consulting email is ross@commercializationguide.com.
Ross, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your morning to talk to me today. This has been a great conversation of getting to
Thank you.
know you and sharing your background, your story, your experiences, your anthology, if you will, of your experience with startups. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me on. It's great getting to know you as well.
Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like and follow Startup Anthology on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast provider. Your feedback means the world to us, so please leave a comment. If you love the episodes, leave your thoughts in the comments on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also, take a moment to visit our website and grab some exclusive merch at startupanthology.com. Your purchase has helped keep this show going. See you next time on Startup Anthology.